Willow, thank you so much for joining me today. Firstly, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm doing well.
Good.
Genuinely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first I wanted to congratulate you on winning the Owen Hart tournament. And what did it mean to you when you found out you were the one lifting the trophy this year?
It was bizarre, honestly. Um, because as much like work, time, energy, and effort like I've put into professional wrestling, I've obviously seen like a great deal of love back from the fans. Um, but I think sometimes it takes a while to kind of realize like, wow, this isn't just like a dream, this is reality, like this is my real life now. So in that sense it's really bizarre and surreal, but like wildly rewarding. So it's cool. It really hit me like when I showed my parents the
Yeah.
championship belt they gave us, and I was like, hey guys, I won this thing. And like they were like, this is insane, you're our daughter, we made you from scratch and you're doing all this. And then I was like, oh yeah, I guess you're right.
Well, I thought I wanted to like rewind back because you've been in the business, what, about 7 years now? Is that
8 years, and like
yeah?
in September is about like 9 years since I started training.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's it's
Yeah.
been it's been a
Yeah.
bit.
So how did you settle on the name Willow Nightingale, and what was kind of your process of getting to there?
So when I had started wrestling, I had like a bunch of different name ideas, and I was kind of like, oh, I have time to like figure it out. And then my school was like, oh, we have our student show like in a month and you're going to be on it. So I was like, oh, I need a name like now. I need to figure it out soon. So I had narrowed it down to like a bunch of nature names,
Mhm.
um, because I felt like that really resonated with me. And like that was kind of the representation I wanted to have, is like really natural. So Willow is a tree, Nightingale is a bird. And I just like the way those two meshed together the most. And like saying it together rhythmically was very fun. And then I thought about like looking at myself and being like, am I this person?
Mhm.
Like, am I whatever the name was? And Willow Nightingale just felt like a good fit. And so I became her.
Yeah, obviously, like it's a ton of yourself. So when you first envisioned Willow Nightingale, what were kind of her traits that you wanted to embody that maybe you didn't fully have?
Oh yeah, when I first started, the character that I had in my head is not anything at all really what I ended up being.
Mm.
Um, because I had been very drawn to like alternative, kind of more like dark things, like so I saw myself being like a bad guy,
Yeah.
and coming out in all black. And in my first few matches I like was that, but I really didn't have much character. I was a very like no nonsense wrestler. It was like I just want to like kick people's butt. And then like one day one of my trainers was like, when you have fun, he didn't say this specifically to me, he said it to the whole class. He was like, but when you have fun, people have fun. Like they enjoy watching you have a good time when you're wrestling. And then something clicked, and I was like, oh yeah, like I love this. Like professional wrestling is something I've loved since I was a kid.
Mhm.
And doing it is something that really does bring me a lot of joy. So why am I not bringing that to the forefront? And that's also who I am. So when I kind of started doing that and letting bits of myself kind of like crack through, and letting my own quirks and idiosyncrasies really shine, that's when I started to notice like people were connecting to that. And that's what kind of led me to starting seeing more success, people taking interest in me. And I was like, that's it. I just had to be myself. That's crazy. And so that's really where the Willow that people know now started taking shape, is just letting myself be me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you, after resting in the indies, how did you first get in contact with AEW to end up in Dark in 2021?
So honestly, Captain Sean Dean was doing a lot to help bring people in during the pandemic. And I had just done a show for Beyond Wrestling up in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I had actually wrestled Aaron Rourke, who is a very lovely fellow in the New England scene. And I guess he had seen that match and reached out to me and was like, hey, would you ever be interested in coming by to Jacksonville to do some dark with us? And I was like, yes, please, I would love it. Let's make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down and I was nervous as heck. And they told me that my first match would actually be with Thunder Rosa, which was a little comforting because I had a little familiarity from we had wrestled for this company, WOW, before, Women of Wrestling, and we were roommates for that. And I knew her from the indies. So there was a little bit of comfort in that, but it was also very intimidating because she, within the company, she was being treated as a very big deal because she is a very talented wrestler. So I was like, okay, there's comfort and intimidation, but listen, wrestling is wrestling. I know how to wrestle no matter where it is. It's the same thing. It's just different eyes on you. And then, they kept asking me to come back, and eventually it somehow manifested into a job.
Mm-hmm.
And now I work here and life is crazy.
So that whole period when you were working on Dark, and then we would see you do some matches on like Dynamite, and when you weren't signed, like what was that like before you got your All Elite graphic, and what were your kind of conversations with Tony? Were you telling him like I want to be here, or were you just waiting for him?
So honestly, at that point, my communication with Tony was pretty limited, again, because of intimidation. Like he does sit there and watch all of the matches. Like when you walk back from the ring, he's one of the first faces you're going to see. But at that point, like, I didn't want to be seen as a nuisance. I wanted to just kind of be like a team player. So I would come back and like express my gratitude and be like, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. But like in my own head, I was pretty frustrated because I was like, I don't know what it is. Like, what's the thing that's happening that like they're using me, but like I still don't really work here in a super official capacity. But I had spoken to a few of my friends who had worked there and a few of the producers, and ultimately was told them, like, I made it very clear. I was like, I want to be here. This is my goal. I love it here. And I think that you guys see something in me. Otherwise you wouldn't keep bringing me back. And eventually that manifested into me getting my All Elite graphic in the Jacksonville crowd too, which is crazy because that's where I did all that dark work. So it was very cool. It was very cool for me.
Yeah.
So
we got to talk about the Strong Women's Championship and all of that. Firstly, how did you end up in the tournament? How did that come about?
So I had been approached by Rocky Romero. And he was telling me about this tournament, and I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. I'd love to be included. And when he first approached me, I obviously was honored that he had considered me for it. But I didn't realize it would be such like a finite group of women. Like there was 4 people in the tournament, so spots were very limited, and I was still chosen to be within that. And that's really when I was like, oh wow, this is cool. Like this is awesome. And the moment I saw who was in the field, I was like, okay, I'm going to train harder, because the possibility for doing not just one match, one really hard-hitting, grueling match, but doing 2 in one night, that all became apparent. So I had gone to my strength and conditioning coach, and I was like, hey, we got to up our cardio. Like, what do we do? I have a few weeks, and I know there's only so much we can do in this time. I trust everything that I've been doing up to this point, but I just want like mentally to feel like I've done all I can to properly prepare. And it's for a first ever time championship. And obviously like that makes it a history making day, no matter what the result is. And I have the opportunity to be a part of it. So I want to put my best foot forward. And I trained as hard as I could. I did tape study of every single person in the tournament. And well, we know how that day ended.
So that match with Mercedes, like obviously she was injured in the match. What was that whole thing like for you? Like the moment, and then not just winning it, but after all that, you're also like the champion that has to carry it too.
So I think one of the worst things that could possibly happen in professional wrestling is having your opponent get injured. because as much as like obviously we're out there, we're putting our bodies on the line and we're fighting, like that's somebody else's life, right? Like an injury isn't something that just takes you away from like wrestling for a few months. At the end of the day, that's something that like changes your anatomy for the rest of time. So you don't want to be involved in a situation like that. But it happens. So well wishes to Mercedes. But at that point, I was like, hey, that's the way it goes. That's the way the cookie crumbles. That was the fight tonight. And I walked out the winner, and it was, I was, as much as like appreciation and love as I had been shown the whole night from the Long Beach crowd, I was not expecting for them to just like embrace me so much that night. Like I had gotten "You Deserve It" chants. Like everybody in the front row when I had like rolled out was like arms outstretched, ready to give me a hug. And it's just like, yeah, that's insane. I will also hug you back, because like for me, I could never have gotten this far if it weren't for people who reminded me that like this is a worthwhile journey for me, even when I feel like life is kicking the heck out of me. Like keep moving forward, because what I do matters to the people who are watching and paying attention. And so I give and I receive from the fans. It's like a symbiotic relationship in that sense, and I really felt it like at its height that night.
So yeah, you're saying there about the support of the fans and like your journey, but I was wondering, like, do you think in any way winning that championship in New Japan kind of affected like your story in AEW? Because we've seen you kind of grow as like this great baby face, and everyone's like rooting for you to have a big moment, and then like you have it in New Japan. Like, do you see that in any way kind of changing like the AEW trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I think it really did add a level of legitimacy to me that hadn't been present before. Like we just spoke about, I was somebody who came from being used essentially to go out there, and like nobody knew who I was, nobody knew anything about me. I was just somebody who was there, and I kind of helped make everyone who's a part of AEW look a little bit better. And it wasn't about me. You know, I was just like, she'll do, put her in the match, you know, she'll have a good match. And I think that day in both my matches with obviously Mercedes, but with Momo Kogo as well, I think those are two of the best matches I've ever had in my career up to this point. And I think people realized when you give me an opponent of that caliber, not only would I be able to hang in there with them, but like I can shine myself. And I think it definitely changed some people's perspectives in terms of the work that I do, and two, in terms of, do I have any star power, right? And I'd like to believe that the answer to those questions were yes. I can do both of those things really well. And when somebody has a shift in the way they're perceived, of course, that's going to affect the way that I'm presented in AEW moving forward. Yes, I do think that helped.
Cool. So you were over in Japan for the Independence Day shows. Was that your first time over there?
It was my second time over there. I had the opportunity to go towards the end of last year with Tokyo Joshi Pro, and I was there for about 10 days. Had a great time. But this was my first time going over with New Japan. And this time there were a lot more people that I had known from wrestling, like Eddie Kingston, for example. I was really happy to be able to have him there. Alex Coughlin is somebody who I actually initially trained with at NYWC in Long Island. So to see all that he's doing in New Japan is really cool right now too. And just get to meet people that I've met throughout the indies. Bad Dude Tito, for example, is somebody I've met like randomly throughout the times, and like have like share randomly, like go in all these different circles and find each other there at such a big moment for both of us is really cool. As well as meeting a bunch of other new people. So it was like on a personal level really cool, as well as a professional level. Yeah.
So this weekend it's the Ring of Honor pay-per-view, and you're someone that's worked Ring of Honor, Collision, and Dynamite recently. So what do you think is the difference between all three from your experience on them?
So Dynamite obviously is like, that is quintessential AEW for me.
Yeah.
Because that was like the first show that ever existed. This was our first time ever going out there and being like, this is what all elite wrestling is about. And I think at its core, that is very much still what it is. Collision being something that is newer, is of course still getting its feet under it and really kind of like carving out what its role in professional wrestling is. And for me right now, what it is just bringing as good professional wrestling in ring as possible. And I think it's really been hitting on that front. And then Ring of Honor to me is really something that has been around for decades at this point and has had a history of the top faces that we see today in professional wrestling all came through there. They all came up through there. And it really honors just like the journey of what it is to be a professional wrestler at all different stages. As someone who's kind of now figuring out who they are, somebody who's really reaching their stride and kind of like hitting their prime, and the people who have given their whole life to this. And honor being in its name is so apropos because that's exactly what it does. It honors professional wrestling. And so that's really how I see the three different companies. I think they all serve an amazing purpose. They all pump out amazing professional wrestling. But to me, that is the differentiation between all three.
Yeah. So you have your match with Athena, and this is not the first time that you two have faced each other. So how do you feel like about your chemistry, and what is it that you maybe respect or like working with Athena?
I think that Athena is like, whatever your opinion might be, I'm sure everybody has different wrestlers. They have different opinions about who's the best in ring. I think undoubtedly Athena is the top 3 women's wrestler in our company. To maybe even the best like athlete that we have. And that's very intimidating. The first time I went out there and wrestled her, someone I had admired for years and years, I don't think I knew fully what I was in for. And then when I just recently wrestled her in the Owen Hart Cup, I had a better idea of how to approach that. But still recognizing what a force she is in the ring, that's a chip on your shoulder that you have to go in there and be aware of. You know, I did pick up the pin in that match, but I recognized the fact that it was, you know, kind of a flash pin. And I'd really love to seal this off with like affirmation as decisively as possible, put that Willow stamp on it without a question of a doubt. I want to be the Ring of Honor Women's Champion. I know what I'm walking into. I know what to expect. You know, and now I just have to go out there and do my best to obtain that, you know, and stick true to myself and hopefully walk out champion Friday night.
And since you've been with AEW and all these steps in your journey, like who have you been working with a lot backstage, and like who has been really helping you and in your corner?
Honestly, we have an amazing like list of coaches, producers who really help us like personally. Jerry Lynn is like one of the sweetest men on earth, but he's also gives great ideas in terms of not just what's going on in ring and having that all be as like crisp, clean, and as possible, but like just your presentation of your character. He's been somebody who's helped me and given me feedback, which I appreciate. Even like someone who might not have the in-ring experience, like Jim Ross, for example, is somebody who has watched me wrestle and been able to give me feedback from a different perspective and say, hey, from where we're standing, this is how this looks, and this looks great, and maybe you could do this better. And sometimes, you know, seeing the out from the outfield is a little bit better than when you're so close to it. So having those different perspectives is really helpful. Arya Davari is somebody who I've been working with a little bit more recently, and I really think he understands wrestling so great, and I appreciate him and all of his opinions. So I could honestly list people all day because everyone I've worked with, I've had positive experiences with. Like the people that are in these positions are in these positions for a reason. Nobody's let me down yet in that regard.
Do you find it like easy to approach with like creative ideas, like characters and matches? How is that backstage?
Yeah, I do. Um, I think it helps that I have such a clear understanding of who I am and what my character is and how my character approaches different scenarios. I think that really helps make it easy. Um, but sometimes, like, when you just need like the little nitpicking idea, like, how do I make this better? That's when I would approach like a coach. And they really get it and they understand it as well. So like to have people who are on the same page as me and help it just click, it's great. And it doesn't feel hard to approach anyone. Yeah, everyone's pretty accessible back there.
Yeah. Someone who really loves you is Ian Cavani, and he
Yeah.
loves to dance and rap. How do you feel when you watch Ian Cavani watch you?
I think that's great because, as I mentioned earlier, um, a lot of my character and what I put out into the crowd goes back to what my trainer told me, and that's that people have fun watching you have fun. And
Yeah.
I think Ian Riccaboni is a prime example of that. Someone who is just like a professional through and through, calls everything down the middle, like every single like consonant and vowel is so professionally pronounced. Like his commentating is amazing, but
Mhm.
just to have those like 30 seconds to a minute, whatever it is that my entrance is, where he just lets loose and
Yeah.
has fun is like, that is kind of the representation of everything that I'm about. You know, it doesn't matter how like professional or like you're going to do things, as long as you have like a second to like cut loose and enjoy it and like sit in the moment and enjoy life. That's great. I love it. I love Ian.
Yeah. And finally, like if you had to pick one thing, what has been the highlight of the year so far? Like we're about halfway through and you've done so much, but what would you say really stands out?
um I don't think I could say one moment stands out. But I think there was in my own personal life, leading up to all of these big moments, I have this moment of self doubt
Yeah.
because I'm a human being. And as much work as I put in to try and trust myself going into these big scenarios, there is a little voice in the back of my head that says, like, but can you do it? And I think the most rewarding thing is that walking away from every situation, I've silenced that self doubt and I've been able to say, you did it, you did it successfully, and you will be able to do it again. Um, so, really, those personal victories have been the most important thing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Willow. It's been really lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. You as well.